So I'd like to move on to the next talk now, and I'm very pleased to welcome Anjali Jain from the Malaviya National Institute of Technology in India, who is going to talk to us about addressing renewable intermittency and operational aspects of generating units in long-term system planning of the Indian power sector. So Anjali, if you can...
Yeah, hello.
Screen.
Yeah, I can share my screen. Yeah, is it fine?
It is. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, good morning all. My name is Anjali Jain and I'm PhD student at Malaviya National Institute of Technology. Sorry, the slide is just, sorry for this. Yeah. I'm PhD student at Malaviya National Institute of Technology, Jaipur, India. The work titled Addressing RE Intermittency and Operational Aspects of Generating Unit in Long-Term System Planning try to produce possible future generation mix that could contribute towards the goal of Indian power sector decarbonization. The current installed capacity of India is 365 gigawatt, in which almost 55% share is of coal-based power plants. However, driven by the concerns of energy security and global warming and by steep declines in the cost, country is accelerating towards a renewable energy future. The government of India has set its INDC targets as to achieve reduction in CO2 emission of its intensity of its GDP by 30 to 35% from 2005 level by 2030. And for this to achieve 40% capacity share of non-fossil fuel generation by 2030. The studies conducted to assess solar and wind energy resources in India shows huge, or we can say sufficient potential to meet future low carbon electricity demand. However, the major hurdle in their large scale grid integration is inherent characteristics of spatial and temporal intermittency that bring many challenges in system planning studies. Being technology rich and having long planning span, long-term planning model or approaches generally use low level of spatial, temporal, and technical details to avoid associated computation. These low level of detailing were sufficient to produce optimal capacity mix in traditional power system that have low variability and almost all generating sources being dispatchable. However, planning models with low spatial resolution fail to capture intra-regional intermittency of renewable energy sources in large geographical regions. Additionally, their low temporal definition does not facilitate inclusion of seasonal diurnal variation of RE sources that demand additional system flexibility to meet increased variability. Further, neglecting techno-economic operational parameters may significantly alter the generation portfolio and result in a suboptimal capacity mix that may cause frequent renewable and load curtailment in real-time system operations. Therefore, in this study, we are developing a long-term system planning model of Indian power sector and trying to overcome these shortcomings of traditional planning approaches. So these are the basic settings of Indian power sector times model, IPST. It has five reasons as a spatial resolution. These reasons are formed by considering control area under respective regional load dispatch center of Indian power system. Base year for calibration is 2015 to 2019. Planning is performed from 2020 to 2040. Time slices are considered, total number of time slices are 288. Time slices are formulated by considering hourly resolution of a representative day for all the month in a year. Further, in the model description, the considered existing technologies are coal, lignite, gas, nuclear, large hydro, and renewable energy that forms small hydro, wind, solar, and biomass. Further, new generation technologies for the investment are coal, gas, large hydro, and renewable energy. Consider discount rate is 10%. Techno-economic parameters for planning are fixed and variable operating cost, availability factor, efficiency, start year of plant, plant life, and investment cost for new technologies. For solar and wind, to capture their intra-regional spatial distribution, different classes have been defined based on their annual capacity factor. Further, to capture the temporal variability of solar and wind, time slice-wise capacity factor is defined for each class. For hydropower plants, region-wise seasonal availability factor is defined. So this is the methodology by which intra-regional variability is captured. The whole geography of India is divided by 1 degree by 1 degree grid cell. Then each grid cell, for each grid cell, by performing GIS-based multi-criteria assessment, land availability for solar and wind plant installation is identified. By this knowledge, the total potential of solar and wind in that grid cell is determined. These grid cells are further classified in 10 different classes based on annual availability factor. So instead of single technology of solar and wind in a region, these classes are defined, 10 classes for solar and 10 classes for wind. These classes are defined to capture intra-regional spatial variability. For electricity demand, total electricity consumption of India is projected by taking past electricity consumption and GDP as the drivers. The regional electricity consumption is estimated by taking their historical share. As we have taken consumption and not the requirement, so to match it with electricity supply, we have taken AT&C losses also. So in 2017, AT&C losses was 21.04%. And in view of the success of all the initiatives taken by Government of India to reform and re-strengthen the T&D sector, these are assumed to reduce to 7% in 2050. So it will reach 9.2% in 2040. Further, to facilitate bidirectional trading, inter-regional links are represented by existing inter-regional transmission capacities. There is a provision in the model that capacity of link will be increased if required. However, no new link will be established between the regions that have no existing link between them. Further, to analyze the decarbonization pathways of Indian power sector, two scenarios are considered. First, RE capacity target. This scenario is governed by government policy targets. To achieve INDC target, Indian government has set an interim target of 175 gigawatt RE capacity by 2022. Further, Central Electricity Authority of India has projected a minimum 100 gigawatt RE capacity addition between 2023 and 2027. So same growth rate as a minimum growth rate up to 2040 is set in the model. Further, in the scenario 2, we have imposed a carbon tax for CO2 emission in the model. In India, currently there is no tax on CO2 emission. However, a coal sales of 400 rupees per ton is imposed on the use of both foreign and domestic coal. In this scenario, we have taken carbon tax that is directly applied on the CO2 emission by any technology that are emitting the CO2. Further, different cases are simulated to analyze the impact of operational constraint related to unit commitment on planning result. First of all, these are the results of capacity mix, generation mix, and generation share without considering any operational constraint in the planning model. We can see that in scenario 2, due to imposed carbon tax, capacity share of solar and wind is high as compared to scenario 1. Further, activity of gas plants is also high in scenario 2, as emission factor of gas plant is very low as compared to coal plant. This results in 187 million ton less CO2 emission in scenario 2 as compared to scenario 1 in 2040. With this, total installed capacity comes out to be 103 gigawatt in 2030 and 1412 gigawatt in 2040 with scenario 1, and 740 gigawatt in 2030 and 1483 gigawatt in 2040 with scenario 2. However, Indian power sector is dominated by inflexible coal power plants. Without any unit commitment operational parameters, model treats these inflexible generation to be highly flexible. And to meet RE variability, model invests in these inflexible low-cost generating sources. However, when we incorporate UC parameters in the model, these parameters restricts the frequent cycling, switching on, off, and ramping up and down of these inflexible generation. And to facilitate renewable penetration and meet system demand, model starts investing in flexibility resources, though they are capital intensive. These are the figures that show time slice-wise dispatch of various technology in 2040 without any unit commitment parameter in the model and with unit commitment parameter in the model. Further, to analyze the impact of operational aspects of generating units on system planning, one after one, various operational parameters related to unit commitment are included in the system. Minimum stable generation, after that ramp rate, then startup and shutdown cost, and then partial load efficiency. It is clearly visible that UC constraint decreases the uptake of solar capacity and uptake of coal capacity also. However, it increases the capacity utilization factor, or we can say plant load factor of coal power plants. To maintain the system flexibility, model increases the investment in storage capacity and decreases the share of RE. This decrease of share of RE and increased activity of coal plant increases the carbon emission in the system. It is also observed that wind plant capacity is increased as wind is less variable and require less flexibility than the solar. So we can say that without operational constraint, model overestimate the uptake of renewable and baseload plant capacity and underestimate the requirement of flexibility resources like gas plants and EES, energy storage systems. These are the final results of both the scenarios, including all operational constraints. Capacity share of solar and wind in scenario 1 is high in 2030 as compared to scenario 1, while it increases in scenario 2 with increased carbon tax in 2040. Due to imposed carbon tax and limit on gas and hydro plants, growth in the limit on growth of gas and hydro plant, the model invests in the storage capacity. However, the gas plant capacity is 6 gigawatt and hydro is 2.5 gigawatt higher in scenario 2. So the total installed capacity excluding the storage in 2040 with including all the UC parameters comes out to be 1156 gigawatt in scenario 1 and 1255 gigawatt in scenario 2 in 2040. These figures show the intra-regional distribution of solar and wind capacity that have captured by the proposed methodology. The class-wise distribution indicates feasible geographical sites having high resource intensity with their projected capacities, and maximum generation can be calculated by these projected capacity and class the defined annual capacity factor for that class. These are the figures show annual CO2 emission in million ton and emission intensity and in metric ton per megawatt hour. To achieve the INDC target, the total CO2 emission from the power sector in 2030 should not exceed 1,634 million ton. So in both the scenarios, INDC targets are fully achieved. Though projected CO2 emission by scenario 2 is less than scenario 1. There is a difference of 79 million ton in 2040 2030, and approximately 174 million ton in 2040. Further, these are the figures that shows regional emission intensity in 2040 with both the scenarios, and compare it with the regional emission intensity in 2015. It is clear from these figures that by 2040, this northeast region of India will have negligible CO2 emission contributed by the power sector. This is because of low electricity demand in this region, only 1.25% share of the total electricity demand of India. And secondly, high potential of hydro plants sufficient to meet the demand. Further, it is clear that the eastern region will continue to contribute the high emission. This is first because low potential and low resource intensity of solar and wind resources in this region. Secondly, low potential of hydro plants and high freight rate for the gas supply, and very low freight rate for the coal supply, because so many coal mines are available in that region. So decarbonization of power sector in this region could be a challenging task, and the only way maybe it is possible by increasing the interconnection with the other regions. So by analyzing these two scenarios, we can conclude that explicitly targeting renewable generation may not fully ensure power sector decarbonization, as fossil fuel generation will continue to contribute to CO2 emission. The high availability of low cost of coal as compared to gas in India, that could be a major cause of continued commercial interest in coal-based plants. However, an instrument like carbon tax can expedite the decarbonization by promoting investment in green technologies and improving efficiency of existing thermal power plants. Though retrofitting of existing coal plant is not the part of this study, we can analyze this situation that in scenario 2 of carbon tax, model to early retirement of approximately 10 gigawatt low efficiency coal power plants. So the active capacity of coal plants with all the UC parameters in the model in scenario 2 is almost 25 gigawatt less as compared to scenario 1. Further, the proposed methodology to classify renewable energy sources in different classes, as opposed to increasing the resolution of planning model, reduces the computational complexity. This is again required for a country like India, where size of power system and geographical area both is very large. So having a large number of regions in long-term planning model could increase the model size significantly. So this methodology can resolve that problem. Further, by analyzing the impact of various operational parameters, we can conclude that for a power system dominated by inflexible generation, incorporating all constraint is essential to ensure adequate quantification of flexibility resources and to analyze the emission related policies. This not only produces a realistic portfolio of planning, but ensure a good plant load factor of coal power plants also. However, we can reduce the simulation time by removing ramping constraint if flexibility is not a big concern. So this is all about this study. And as an extension of this work, we are planning to link this times model and establish a bidirectional linking with our operational model to analyze the impact of other operational aspects like reserve scheduling, demand response, and DC load flow analysis for interstate links. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjali. That's really interesting. We have very little time for questions, but I want to take a couple. And so first of all, from Omkar, is there a deployment of CCUS in the carbon tax scenario? It's carbon capture and storage.
Sorry, is this about carbon capture storage?
Yes.
No, actually, in India, the potential of carbon capture storage is very low, and further there are so many political constraints, and the finance is again a problem because it is an expensive technology. So we have not considered. We have just imposed the carbon tax on CO2 emission.
Okay, and Gil just asks if you have any figures about the change in the costs. So, for example, the activity costs when you add the flexibility constraints compared to the scenarios where you don't use the constraints. How much more expensive?
Okay. Um, Actually, here in this presentation, I don't have those figures. Um, Between two scenarios, I can show there is a almost 1.4 times in the 2040 the marginal cost of electricity when we impose the carbon tax. But between the unit commitment, I don't remember, and I don't have any graph right now, any figure. Sorry for that.
Okay, that's fine. I think that's all we have time for. We need to move on to the next presentation. So thank you very much, Anjali. That's great. There's another question you could maybe answer in the chat.
How will the generation mix change in low